Hey, what's up everybody? I'm Brian and here today I'm working on making one of my favorite dishes, beef bourguignon. This is a classic French dish. I found it from Mastering the Art of French Cooking by Julia Child. I'm doing a very traditional take on it with a few twists. First of all, I'm going to be making it in a pressure cooker, a specific one, specifically the Instant Pot. If you haven't seen one of these things, this is fantastic. I'm going to be cutting the time in half, and the amount of stuff that I'm cleaning is going to be cut tremendously in half. If you don't have an Instant Pot, you can do it in a Dutch oven. That is completely fine. The other thing is that I'm going to be doing it slightly different than the traditional method. Beef bourguignon is a beef stew, which is in a red wine broth. What I actually ended up doing is I like to further reduce this so it's not so much of a broth as it is a sauce. And then what I do is I serve this over egg noodles. It's one of my favorites. It usually takes a lot of time, but with the Instant Pot, you can cut it in half easy. But again, if you don't have that, I definitely recommend using a Dutch oven, okay? So we're going to get into the ingredients and beginning to cook. All right, so now we're going to be getting into the ingredients with what we're going to be doing today. So first off, I've got about 3 pounds of just some stew beef that I got from the local store. It's already cut up, it's good. Notice I've got it in between paper towels. We're going to be browning this first before we add it to the stew, so we're going to go ahead and dry it off. All right, because that's going to be the key to browning it nicely. We've also got about 3/4 pound of bacon here cut into some small strips. We've got some onions and carrots. Notice that I've actually kept the peels. Why would I do that? Well, every time I do this, I go ahead and I just grab a Ziploc bag, throw everything in there. My onions, my carrots, if I'm doing celery, throw that in there. And then I'll put that in the freezer. And this is a base for a great stock, whether I'm doing a chicken stock or a beef stock. Also, if I'm making a whole chicken, I'll go ahead and keep the carcass, freeze that also. So everything's all good to go when I want to make a broth. We've also got some, like I said, beef broth, Italian seasoning, and some bay leaves. The traditional recipe calls for just specifically thyme, but anytime that you use thyme, sage, basil, oregano, if it specifically calls out for it, I just throw in some Italian seasoning. So there's that. Got about a tablespoon of Italian seasoning and 2 bay leaves, about 2.5 cups of beef broth, about 2 tablespoons of tomato paste, which is about half a can. And then what do you do with the other half a can? Well, you take your favorite ice cube making device, throw it in there. I know these cups hold about a tablespoon. So take that, throw that in the freezer. So instead of opening up a can and having half a can left over, you can go ahead and just pull it right out of the freezer. And then some salt and pepper, and that's really about it. Oh yeah, and then we've got a bottle of wine over there. You want to use a nice good red, nice drinking red. If you like it more dry, get a more dry one, but this is going to bring out the real good flavor of the beef bourguignon. All right, so now let's get to cooking it. All right, so I'm going to get going on making the beef bourguignon. So again, I said I'm going to be using this Instant Pot, which is a pressure cooker, slow cooker. It sautés, it does everything. And as you can see right now, it is on saute. It's hot, it's ready to go. The other setting that we're going to be using is the pressure cook setting, and that's when we're making the actual beef bourguignon. But again, if you don't have a instant cooker, you can use a Dutch oven. I highly recommend using a Dutch oven instead of a pot and a pan because you want to keep all the browning solids in the pot, okay? So that way you can go from the stovetop to the oven. Now this is definitely hot right now, so I'm going to first start by throwing in my bacon. Now, you can't do this with a normal slow cooker. So this is going to go ahead and brown it really at a nice high heat. We're going to let this go for several minutes. Let that brown up nice. And then we're going to go ahead and remove that. So we're going to do the bacon first. Keep all the liquids, keep that in there, and we're going to use that to help us brown the beef. Alright, so it's been about 7 minutes or so. This bacon is pretty well cooked. So, if you notice on the bottom of this pot, You got that nice rendering of the bacon. You got those nice little flavorful bits that are going to be great in cooking it. So what I'm doing is I'm just transferring the bacon right now to another bowl. We're going to set that aside, and I'm not going to take away any of this fat that the bacon cooked in. We're going to leave that for the beef. So I'm just going to make sure we get all of this out. Put this aside for later. Try to get as much of that fat off of it as we can right now. And then we're going to go ahead and throw the beef in. Now we're going to go ahead and cook the beef in this. We're just going to brown the sides of the beef right now. We're not going to actually cook it, but we do want to brown it and brown it in that flavor of the bacon that's been going for the past few minutes. And again, you don't have an Instant Pot. You're going to get the same sort of effect with the Dutch oven, same time and the same sort of cooking where you have these bits on the bottom. You're going to get that on the Dutch oven. You don't want to do this in a non-stick pan. You want to have these little bits in there as well. Okay? That's going to really add to the flavor. So now I'm going to set that bacon aside and we're going to go ahead and add the beef. Now, I'm not going to add all the beef at once. Again, we're going to go ahead and pat it dry. And I'm just going to go ahead and throw in several pieces at a time. You want to make sure you give them room. Okay, you don't want to throw everything in all at once. You can hear that bacon, that beef sizzling in that bacon grease. This is going to be good flavor right here. So it's probably going to take, for those 3 pounds, it's probably going to take about maybe 3 or 4 batches. But again, you don't want to crowd that pan, no matter what. Alright, maybe we can fit maybe one more on the side there, small one. Now be careful, this is very hot oil. This will burn you, so you gotta be careful with that. And we're gonna let this go several minutes each side. This is probably where most of the time is gonna take in the beef bourguignon, that you're actually gonna be actively doing something. I'd say this whole browning process is gonna take about 10 to 15 minutes, maybe a little bit more. But I'm gonna go ahead, brown one side. After several minutes, we'll flip it over, do the other side, and then we're just going to go ahead and set it aside in the bacon while we do the other batches. Alright, so it's been several minutes now. We're going to go ahead and check the beef. Got it nicely browned, so I'm going to go ahead and flip this. The other thing that I did is I actually seasoned everything with salt and pepper. Just seasoned the top of it quickly. So I'm going to go ahead and flip everything over. Hit it again with a little salt and pepper and brown the other side. So go ahead and flip that. Oh, this is looking real good already. And again, this is going to really add to that flavor profile that we're trying to build here. And also doing this is really going to clear up a lot of those nice solids that the bacon gave us. So this is going to come out good. Couple more pieces. Alright, those are looking really nice. And again, just I'm going to hit it with a little bit of salt and pepper. Quick little sprinkle on top, just to season everything nicely. And let that go for several more minutes. Alright, so we've got the beef just about done. Hey, come back here. Come back here. That's my sous chef. Say hi, Stephanie. Yep, she's helping me with the cooking usually. And we're just going ahead pulling off this beef broth, or the beef now. Nice and brown. Now what I did have to do is I did have to go ahead and pull some of the liquid out. Just because we were not really like browning the meat, we were more or less boiling it. So I did keep and reserve some of the liquid. Alright, some of those parts aside. We're going to add that back in for some flavor a little bit later on. Now that beef is all browned, and again we got all those nice good bits in there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to throw the onions and the carrots in. Throw a little bit of that oil back in there. Alright, this is still on the saute setting. We're going to go ahead, just stir that around, get that a little bit hot again. And I'm going to cook that right in with those brown bits. So we're going to throw in the onions. Throw that in. Throw in the carrots. We're going to let that go for about maybe like 5 or 10 minutes or so. Now, I said earlier on that beef took about 15 minutes to brown. Well, with the amount of beef that we had, that took about a half hour, honestly. Now, that's going to be the longest part of this whole thing, where we're going to actually have to sit and stay in front of the pot and cook. Alright, this isn't going to take all that long. And again, I had to pull some of that liquid from the bacon and the beef out to really brown that beef. You may have to throw a little bit more in, or throw in some olive oil. And all we're going to do is just go ahead and just saute these onions and carrots. Just get them nice and soften them up a little bit. We're going to do this for about 5 minutes till the onions are a little bit translucent. Carrots are a little bit softened. Now, while this is going on, and you're going to look at before you put the vegetables in, you're going to see all that stuff on the bottom of the pot and see it's just caked on. Just think, oh man, this is just going to burn to the pot. And it's same is going to be true if you do this in the Dutch oven. It's really not, though, and especially once we put these onions in, they're going to release a lot of that liquid, and it's going to kind of clean up and just add that flavor. And the bottom of the pot's going to be completely clean by the time we're done with this. So I'm going to go ahead and let this go for about another minute or so. And actually, you can look on the bottom and start to see that some of this is starting to clean up there. You can see right there some of those brown bits that seem to be really baked and caked on really come off easy now that we're sauteing this. Now, I'm doing the onions and carrots. One other ingredient that I forgot to mention early on that we're going to do is throw in some minced garlic. So I've got about maybe a tablespoon and a half of minced garlic in here. I'm not going to throw that in right now. I'm going to let the onions and carrots go a little bit longer, and then I'm going to throw the garlic in. Garlic browns and actually burns rather quickly, so I'm going to go ahead and let these soften up first. If they're a little bit harder, give them a couple more minutes, give them a good head start, and then I'm going to go ahead and throw in the garlic. I'm also going to throw in the Italian seasoning too while we're at it. And I think now's a good time to throw in the Italian seasoning. We're going to let this kind of sweat out in the onions and the carrots. And again, that's about a tablespoon. Throw that in, and like I said, Italian seasoning is one of those things where even though this specifically called out for time, Italian seasoning is so versatile. It can be used in so many different dishes. And it's one of those things that you can get at the wholesale club or get a big jar of it. So it's something I use all the time, and I use it in just about everything. So it really makes it easy and just inexpensive when you get at the wholesale club. Alright, so these have been softened up a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and throw in the garlic now and mix that around. And again, I'm waiting a little bit to throw the garlic in because you don't want it to burn. We just want to release all of the aromas and all of the oils. And then, yeah, if you look at this right here, you can start to see. You get that nice liquid coming and actually cleaning up the bottom of this pot. So we're keeping all of the flavors in this. And that's one of the keys to this beef bourguignon. And again, if you're using the Dutch oven, you're going to see the same exact thing when you do this on the stovetop. Now, right about now, I would probably say you'd want to preheat your oven. If you're doing this in the Dutch oven, preheat it to about 350 and let this start to cook. But me using the Instant Pot right now, this is going to go ahead and cook right here. Alright. So I'm going to let this go for about another minute. These onions are starting to become a little bit more translucent. Carrots are starting to soften up, and this is starting to come together. This is about right here is one of my favorite parts of cooking. Adding Italian seasoning, adding garlic, adding carrots and onions. And right now, my kitchen smells so good. This is one of my favorite scents. They need to bottle this as a fragrance, make it into a candle. This is like one of my favorite things ever. Alright. Yeah, now this whole time, this whole pot has been on saute. I've had to actually reset it. So mine only does saute in about 30-minute bursts, so I've had to reset it once. And then, yeah, if you look at the bottom of this pot, you can start to see that browning starting to clear up real nice. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and call that. I think we're good right now. So the next thing I'm gonna do, we're gonna throw in the wine, the broth, and we're gonna let this go. Oh, and the tomato paste. So again, I'm gonna start with half a bottle of the broth of the wine, and about half of that can of tomato paste, which is gonna be about 2, maybe 2.5 tablespoons. Now, the red wine and the tomato paste are going to make this just so rich, and you can already smell the flavors coming together. Really nice, really rich. And even if you're using the frozen tomato paste like I showed you earlier on, you don't have to defrost it or anything first. You can just throw it right in, no problem. I'm gonna get all of that in there. All right. So we're gonna let that go for a couple minutes. Mix that up, and this is also gonna help us deglaze the bottom of that pot. If there's any brown stuff, any of that cooked bits left over, this is gonna help clean that up and get all of those flavors in here. This is really nice right now. Now we're going to add the rest of the red wine in a little bit. I don't want to add it all right now. It's going to make it harder to heat up. But we're going to go ahead and add a part, clean up that bottom, deglaze it really nice. And then a little bit, what we're going to do is continue adding in the red wine. And before we add in the beef broth, I'm going to add back in now the beef and the bacon. And what we're going to do is we're going to add enough beef stock to go ahead and cover the beef. All right. So I'm stirring it around. I'm feeling the bottom. Got a little bit more brown stuff on the bottom. A little bit more cooked stuff, but this is starting to thicken up nicely. It smells amazing right now. So add back in a little bit of that cooking from the bacon and the beef. And we're going to throw in the rest of that bottle of wine. Maybe leave a little bit left over. Stir that around. And now let's add in the beef and the bacon. Alright. Again, we set this aside from earlier on. Alright. Now, one thing with the Instant Pot is you can't have it too full. So my Instant Pot actually has a line. Let me see if I can find it. Here we go. Where the max, it's kind of hard to read it with the bacon splatter, but the max is 2/3. You don't want to fill it up too much, because you're actually cooking in a pressure cooker. The meat and everything is going to expand, and you don't want to blow the lid off of this thing. Now, I have read this. A lot of these actually have safety controls where there's no way this is going to explode. Okay? Otherwise, that'd be a really cool Mythbusters episode. Alright, so that's the entire bottle of the red wine. I'm going to go ahead and add, I'm probably going to add about 1 cup of that beef broth in. Now, no, I'm cheating. This is actually pre-made beef stock from the store. This is not my homemade. I don't have enough homemade vegetables and beef bones yet to make beef stock yet. That'll probably happen in the fall. And that'll be saved for another video at another time. Alright. So, that's just about everything. Now, the only other thing I'm going to do is throw in the bay leaves. 1 and 2. And there we go. We're going to let that go ahead and really cook down. And now we're going to go ahead and change the pressure settings now. So I'm going to put the top on. Oh, actually, no. Before I'm going to do that, I'm going to turn this off. So I'm going to let this actually cool down. I realized this the hard way one time. Once you have it on saute, you want it to kind of cool down a little bit, the heating element, before you put it on boil. Otherwise, what it's going to do is it's going to scald to the bottom, and then you actually have an error message come up that says burnt, B-U-R-N. So just to do that, I'm going to kind of let it simmer down for a little bit, and then I'm going to go ahead and put the pressure settings on. Alright, so it's been about 5 minutes. I actually went and unplugged it, took the pot out to really let the heating element cool down. And also kind of lets you see what's inside. It's basically like a crock pot where you've got the heating element down there, you have the outer pot, and then you have the inner pot, which is what we're cooking with. Now, believe it or not, when you're sauteing, this outer pot, the inner pot, actually isn't really that hot to touch up top. It's a little warm, but it's actually, I was able to grab it easily. So now we go ahead, and I'm going to put the lid on, and now we're going to start cooking this bad boy. So I'm going to take the lid, and now we're going to treat it as a pressure cooker. Now, listen to this. It makes a noise when the lid is on, but it's released, and then when you lock it, it makes another noise saying that it's definitely locked. Now also there's a knob here. Putting it in one position just constantly vents it, so it's not building up pressure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put it to the sealing position. So it's sealing. This is sealed. A little bit of steam will come off at first, but then it'll build up pressure and that will stop. And then this is a pressure release valve, where as it goes, you're going to start to see it kind of dance a little bit and then come up. When this valve right here pops up where you can see the little silver disc, that's when it's sealed, that's when the pressure builds up, and that's when you're going to start cooking. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and push the pressure cook button, which is right here, and I'm going to go ahead and set it for, say, about 45 minutes. Alright, and then that's it. I'm making sure I'm on high pressure. If that wasn't the case, I would push the pressure level button to make that go to high pressure. It's saying it's on. So now what it's going to do is that heating element's going to come on. It's going to build up pressure. And then when that little needle pops up, then it's going to start pressurizing. After that, once it's up to pressure, this is going to start counting down. And at this point, you can go ahead and do dishes. I would do grating, play with the kids, do something else. I mean, at that point, set it and forget it. So I will see you back here in about 45-50 minutes. All right, so it's starting to build up pressure. That valve was just kind of flickering, and now it's up. So that's how you know that it's building up pressure. It kind of hisses a little bit of steam came out. I don't know if you got to see it kind of bounce around a little bit, and it just flipped up. So at this point, it's building up pressure, and once it does that, this timer is going to go ahead and count down from 45 minutes down. Now, if you were doing this in a Dutch oven, basically you're throwing everything in the Dutch oven the same way I did with the Instant Pot, but then what you're going to do is you're going to put the lid on it, throw it in the oven. You're going to put it at about 350. It's probably going to go for about a good hour and a half. Now, what you do want to do, what I like to do is I don't leave the lid completely on the Dutch oven. What I like to do is I just like to leave it off a little bit so it has a little bit of room for steam to escape, and that's going to greatly reduce that liquid in there, okay? But whether you're doing it in the Dutch oven or the Instant Pot, this is where you can go ahead and just do dishes and take your time, do whatever else. It's right now set it and forget it. So we'll see you again in about 45 minutes. All right, so 45 minutes is up. So we're done with the pressure cooking now. So what I'm going to do is this has a setting where it automatically keeps warm. So there's two ways to release the pressure now to stop the cooking from completely happening. One is to just leave it at this setting and just let it naturally reduce the pressure down. The other one is to go ahead and do what's known as a quick release. And that's where we take this valve and switch it from the sealed position to the venting position. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And all it is just go ahead, you're going to switch it over, and you're going to see a whole bunch of steam build up and just pile out of here. So I'm going to show you like this. All right. So you can see the steam coming out now. This is that quick release function. Alright, so we're letting the pressure out, and if you watch that valve, once all the pressure comes out, it's probably going to take about another minute, that valve will go down, and that's when it's going to be safe to open this. Now, the Instant Pot has a special feature where it's basically a magnetic lock, where when this pressure valve is in the up position, meaning it's pressurized, you physically cannot open the lid. There's a magnetic lock that engages when the valve is up. So even if I wanted to right now, there's no way I can open this. The only way you can open it is once that pressure's built down enough and that valve drops. So the steam's starting to subside a little bit. Probably take about another 30 seconds. If you really wanted to, you could take like a pin or something and push that valve down to aid in the steam release. But we're just going to let it go down. And then we're going to see what it looks like, alright? So we're almost done with the steam release. And again, if you wanted to, for example, if you were like, I don't know, teaching all day or something, this will stay on keep warm, where it will keep the pressure up and everything. So if you wanted to kill it, you'd really have to hit cancel. But otherwise, it's just going to keep warm and keep everything at a nice, steady state. And the steam is almost gone. And what we're waiting for is we're looking for this valve. We're waiting for it to completely drop. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and see how much liquid is in here. If there's a lot of liquid, what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to actually cook the egg noodles in this liquid. If you wanted to, you could cook them separate. And then what I would do is I would actually take the lid off, put the slow cooker on saute, which is that button right down there. Oh, and the knob just went down. So that means it's easy to release now. Makes the noise, and there we go. So right now we've got this nice liquid. This is, oh my gosh, it smells so good. Yeah, we've got a fair amount of this liquid. Oh, it smells so good. So I'm going to take out the bay leaves. Take out one. Take out two. I'm going to go ahead and actually pull those egg noodles and put them right in there. So I'm going to use for this, I'm going to use about a half a bag. If you wanted to, you could cook them on the side, so then that way you have regular egg noodles. If you wanted to cook the egg noodles so you have plain egg noodles on the side, I'm going to go ahead and just throw these in right now. That's about a half a bag. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix it in. And then I'm going to pressurize it again. So I'm going to quick pressurize this. We'll probably set it for about 8 minutes. So we're going to mix all of this together. Oh, this is just smelling so good. Yeah, it is. Thank you, Justin. Even Justin thinks it's good. So mix it together. We're going to throw the lid on. Now it's going to take a few more minutes to pressurize back up. Oh, there we go. Alright, so it's locked. It made that happy little noise. I'm going to hit cancel, pressure cook, and I'm just going to set this for 8 minutes. So I'm just going to go down, and we're going to go ahead and just leave that. Put this back to seal. Don't leave that in the vent position. It's really important that you put that back in the seal position. So now the temperature's back on. We're sealed. That pressure's going to build up. So altogether, it's going to cook 8 minutes. Probably take about 5 minutes to build back up. So in about 13 minutes, we should be good to go. All right, so the 8 minutes has gone by after the pressure built up. And we're just releasing pressure now. So one thing to take note of is, even though we're doing this in an Instant Pot, it's still going to take quite a long time. I mean, we're talking about browning the bacon, taking it out, browning the beef, which is going to take several batches, taking it out, and then we kind of saute the vegetables and put everything together, and then saute it and actually bring it to pressure, and it's going to cook another 45 minutes. This takes a long time, even for an Instant Pot. I think I've been doing this now for about 2.5 to 3 hours. So even with the Instant Pot, this is one of those long, low and slow kind of meals almost. Even if you do this in a Dutch oven, it's going to take a while, but it is totally worth it. This is not one of those things that I normally do during the school year, just because of the time it takes, but it's just one of those where every once in a while you do it, it's worth it, it's just so good. So the pressure is building down. We released it, we're venting, and then I actually already unplugged it, so we're not going to have any residual heat. And then once that pressure dies off and that valve releases, we're pretty much good to go. This is it. Now, if you wanted to, you could have a little bit of minced parsley to sprinkle on top, but this is going to be it. So I'm looking forward to it. So we're just going to let this pressure die down naturally. Like I said, if you wanted to, you can go ahead and just push that down. Right now, obviously, it was almost done. If it was going to give up resistance, it would mean that it's still building pressure. Just hold it down. All you're doing is just releasing the pressure, which at this point, that's all we want to do. And there we go. Beef bourguignon is done. So I'm just going to go ahead, mix this up, and then, yeah, look at that. So again, if you wanted to cook the noodles separate, that's how I usually do it, but man, that looks good right there. And that is reduced down to a nice sauce. The noodles soaked up a lot of the juice, so that we have a nice sauce with this. Those carrots are nice and tender. The beef is just fall apart good. The bacon's adding flavor. I mean, all you gotta do is just scoop this on a plate. I mean, how good is that? That is it right there. All right, so this is the plate. This is it. And then if you look at this, I mean, it is just fork tender. That's exactly what you want it to be. This is... The flavors are just so there. You can taste the flavor of the wine, the beef broth. The beef is there. This is one of my favorites. And it tastes just as good in the Instant Pot as it does in the pressure cooker. So I hope you guys like this. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think, and I will see you later. Bye, guys.